I see we have 45 participants and hopefully a few more will join us. So my name is Dr. Nikki Ter Blanche, and I am full-time faculty at the University of Stellenbosch Business School, and also currently the head of the Masters in Coaching, the MPhil in Management Coaching program. It's my pleasure to welcome you today at the first of what will hopefully be many leadership coaching roundtable discussions. So the aim of this, we will aim to do it every 2 months. And the aim really of this is to promote a community of coaching in South Africa and for Africa. The MPhil in Management Coaching program at USB has produced graduates since 2010, and I believe we have a strong voice and a strong contribution to make to the coaching community. So it's for coaches, but also for clients, people who use coaches, for us to have a place where we can discuss coaching, we can learn from each other, but we can also challenge each other in terms of what coaching is and where it's going and how we can benefit from it. So this is the very first leadership roundtable discussion then, and the topic, very appropriately, I think given where we are at the moment, is coaching amidst chaos, enabling your clients to survive and thrive despite the pandemic. The reason I chose this topic as the first discussion is when the pandemic struck more than a year ago, you'll remember March, April, I took the opportunity to do research. So I interviewed 26 coaches around the world to get their opinion about what they think, how they are handling the pandemic and what they think how it's going to play out. And I've written a few articles about that and published a paper or two. And I think it's more than a year later now. So I'm actually curious to see what has transpired. How have coaches, we will be asking 2 questions today. How have coaches adapted their practice amidst the chaos? And more importantly, how is coaching currently helping people to cope during this pandemic? And who better to answer the question than my esteemed panel that I'm very grateful who have accepted the invitation to join us today. So there you see them on the screen. They all have PhDs. So they're all very learned people, but also importantly, they are practicing coaches. So they are in the trenches, helping their clients so they can speak from first-hand experience. They are also all faculty on the MPhil in Management Coaching program. So in a way, it's also for us to showcase the incredible talent that we have and diversity that we have on our program. And I will shortly ask each of them to introduce themselves very, very briefly. But yes, so that is then what we will do today. So until 6 o'clock, I will be facilitating the discussion by asking each of them to share their opinion and their experience on the 2 questions. How have coaches had to adopt and adapt during the pandemic? And secondly, how is coaching actually helping a world desperate in need for help out there? So let's start off then. I'm going to do it alphabetically, and I see our marketing department has been very rigorous in arranging everyone alphabetically, so that makes it easy for me. But just before we start, I just want to also acknowledge Salumi, Professor Salumi van Koller-Pieter, who's the bottom right there. Shame her surname starts with a V, so she's last on the list, but she's certainly not last in terms of her contribution to coaching. So just those of you who may know or may not know, she started this coaching program back in 2010. And let's not forget the enormous contribution she's made to coaching education in South Africa. So with that then, I want to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. So Dorian, you are alphabetically first on the list. So please a short introduction of who you are. And if we can just spotlight each speaker as well, please. Dorian, are you there? Oh, Dorian, you have done the cardinal.
Muted myself.
Yes.
Yes. So, Nikki, thank you so much for organizing this. I think this is a great opportunity for us to meet and greet one another and to share experiences. And I'm looking forward to doing it more often. So the first question, how...
Dorian, sorry, just please introduce yourself just quickly, who you are, and then we'll start with the question. So if every panelist could just quickly introduce themselves, round robin.
All right. So I'm Dorian Aiken, and I teach on the MPhil program with Salome and Nikki and my colleagues on the panel. I coach and I consult and I facilitate. My background is integral theory, integral coaching, and Nancy Klein's thinking environment approach. I'm completely obsessed at the moment with leadership coaching, coaching people in coaching, teaching people coaching skills so that they can lead with a coaching style. So that's me for the moment.
Thank you very much, Dorian. Thank you. Great. Let's move on then to Kathy. Kathy, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
I'm Kathy, and I also work on the program, facilitate. And my background is in the corporate space, HR and OD. That was quite a few years back. And I've been in the coaching space for about 19 years now. And I'm really passionate about working with leaders, very much like Dorian as well. But I enjoy working with leaders going through uncertainty, change, and also transitions. Short and sweet.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. Dumi, you are next up. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you, Nikki. Great platform, by the way, the inaugural Leadership Coaching Roundtable. Honored to be part of this panel and to talk to our fellow coaches and anyone interested in this topic. So my name is Dumi Sani, just call me Dumi. I'm a father of many, many kids, and biologically 3 only. And I define myself like that because that's very important to instill values in children. I work with Ubuntu, Integral, and Gestalt, and many others like that. I'm a coach, believes in human connection and rehumanizing our shared spaces. And I am part faculty and teach on the MPhil, and also teach in the Integral School with Dr. Paddy Pampalis, the coaching center. And one thing I would like to just mention is that I'm very interested in team coaching, and that's part of what I do now globally on the faculty of the WBEX Global Team Coaching Institute on team coaching. So that's one hot ticket in coaching right now.
Great, thanks, Dumi. And hopefully we can also hear your opinion on the role maybe the team coaching plays in there. But thank you for that introduction. Next up, we have Roger, Dr. Roger Maitland.
Everybody, it's good to be here and to see so many familiar faces on the panel on the group. I'm a transition coach, and I've been coaching since about 2003. I've got an interest in seeing all the kinds of processes we're going to be talking about today and coaching as a complex system, and have done a fair amount of research and got a strong interest in sustainability transitions. So those are kind of key interests that I follow. I coach and I also consult, and I've got a focus on developing the coaching capacity of organizations. Nikki, I think that's enough from my side.
Great. Thank you, Roger. Thanks for that. And then next up, we have Mongezi. Mongezi, I think you also is, there we go.
There you go. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see everyone. Thank you, Nikki, for organizing this. It's good to see. It's good to see you as well. My name is Mongezi Makalima, as you've seen. My work really is about helping leaders develop consciousness and accountability across the continent. I think my big work is around putting Africa in the center of the world where it's supposed to be. I've been doing that now since about 1997. I think that was the first time I got paid full-time, properly, formally for coaching, and I haven't stopped since. I'm excited about it. I'm the chairperson of the Africa Board for Coaching for my sins, and have been excited to see where coaching is since we started many years ago. So I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Mongezi. Sunny, you are next up.
Hi, everybody. It's lovely to have this. Thanks so much, Nikki, for organizing. So when people ask me what I do, I always say I help people to think, I help leaders to think and to treat people well. So that's the shortest way I can find to describe it. So I work with leadership development and really helping leaders to transform themselves, if you like, really developing deep understanding of themselves and how they impact and influence other people, their business, etc. But really understanding themselves and developing an understanding of how to understand the people and work with the people they lead and manage. And so it's all about helping them to transform to the next level of leadership from where they are. But I work with individual executives, and like many of you, I work with teams and usually it's the team for the leaders that I'm working with. And so I've spent a lot of time looking at the development of team coaching. And as Dorian, my work is very much underpinned by the thinking environment, but also by organizational relationship systems coaching. And if people ask me what I do, it's about helping people to build relationships, because everything in life is around building relationships, communication. And that's really where I work with leaders. I teach, lecture, I write, I research. I really try to have a range of things that I do so that I'm kind of understanding coaching and leadership from all angles if I can. And I'm very lucky to work with many, many of you. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sunny. And then last but certainly not least, our own Professor Salome van Coller-Pieter.
You're ever so kind. Thank you, Nikki. Good to see all the faculty and all the students that's in the room as well, and potential students. So this is an exciting evening. We're kicking off something new. My background really is as an industrial psychologist working in organizations from basically when I graduated to help change happen. So lots of individual assessments, team assessments, and so on, and facilitation of workshops to get teams to work together and to give effect to the objectives of their own team as well as the organization. So I come from a practice orientation for many years into academia, or academe, as they say. I've just got my head around being an academic about 80% of the time. I'm writing some, mostly in project management, coaching, and mentoring. And I also, 20% of my time, I run a practice. And the practice is really focusing for many years, focusing on getting teams and organizations to align the structure, the strategy, the what they do, and the culture, the how they do it, and to see these two as equals, not putting culture somewhere here under HR to be a project. So also the translation of behaviors that we want to see embodied in cultures to be executed, to people to display those behaviors through team coaching and one-on-one coaching. So my passion is still that. I'm putting a whole big flavor of project management in there because that's the way things actually get done. So that's a combination of what I offer, and I teach, and I learn from my students, and that's me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Salome. Yes, and the reason I wanted these introductions is so that you, as the audience, you get a sense of where the opinions come from. But what I always marvel about coaching is how we come from so many different backgrounds, and that's what makes coaching so strong, right? We bring all this incredible collection and background from us. So let's get into it then. So Dorian, I want to start with you. How have you personally had to adopt your coaching practice, and what have you seen other coaches do, the way they coach, if at all? Maybe nothing's changed, but have you seen adoption of coaching practice since this pandemic started a year ago, more than a year ago?
Well, I can't talk too much for other coaches, except for one or two conversations that I share on this. And it's been a mix, Nikki. There've been a silver lining around the COVID coaching, and there's been a few difficulties and disappointments. So the silver lining has been the way the intimacy in the coaching conversation has developed online, one-on-one. The less impressive side is working with teams and doing that kind of development online. There's something that is a bit deadening when you're working with more than one person. So I don't find the coaching conversation or the coaching experience loses anything one-on-one. In fact, sometimes it's actually brought a kind of intimacy and intensity that's been wonderful to have. But the group work has definitely been an issue, partly because of not being able to see people's faces, poor receptivity, etc., Wi-Fi difficulties. But on the whole, I'd say that individual coaching has thrived, and people have responded well in the space. The team coaching, yes, with reservations.
Great. Okay. Thank you. That's very interesting insights, the distinction between team and individual. Kathy, do you have anything to add, or what have you observed in your own practice? Oh, the mute. Ah, there we go.
There we go. For me, the importance of being flexible has really been important, particularly through the pandemic, and then also coaching in different countries where the pandemic and the wave, there are different waves, different stages, different vaccination rollout programs. It's not the same everywhere. So the importance of really being context specific as well, really understanding your client's context, where they are at, and meeting them where they are at, both as individuals and also their context, really important. And then flexing one's own practice in terms of, yes, we were working on this before the pandemic started. We committed to certain specific areas, and the pandemic arrived, and being flexible enough to let that go and to work with where you need to work to be most useful for your client. I think that was very, very, very important through this time, and continues to be. Even now it's going on in South Africa, really important.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you, Kathy. And it reminds me of one of the first coaching books I read a long time ago was Dancing in the Moment with Your Client. And I think that's what we have to be really good at, dancing at the moment. Dumi, what have you observed in terms of your own coaching practice, how you had to change, if at all, to adapt to this pandemic?
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you to, I think, Doreen, and for me, I listened to that and resonate, and Kathy. For me, I see that in my own practice, more people are looking for coaching support, and just recently had to refer two private clients, not for coaching, but to more counseling and therapy, because I think it wasn't really suited for coaching. It was a breakdown that required other skills, and for that, and I think that's one area that's very, very interesting. If say since February, I have two clients like that, and that's just one coach. How about others? We need to look within. Are we taking on some coaching that does not really need coaching? We need to ask ourselves that question. In these conditions, under these circumstances, what do we see? What are the patterns that we see? Maybe it's just the clients that come to me, I don't know, but just putting it out there. So for me, virtual engagement, Nikki, I'm seeing that, well, all my practices move now 100% virtual. That's one thing. And I'm noticing a new rhythm in my own coaching and the pacing with my clients that's there. And I'm seeing that some of my clients who want a more momentum in the coaching is not just one session per month. Of clients that say, I'm available, can we do this one every 3 weeks or something like that? So that pacing and rhythm is something that's changed. And then around the issue around chaos and understanding that, for me, some of my clients, the topics I've noticed, and in preparing for this, I just looked at some of the work I've been doing with the topics that are common around that. There's a lot around seeking inner resilience and tapping into that. How do I cope with this? How do I deal with this? There's quite a lot around that. People looking to strengthen themselves in what they're dealing with, and then leading to looking for new leadership ways of self-leading and leading others and groups. And then finally, teams and working with others differently virtually. That's come up a lot. And these are topics that I'm dealing with now in some of the teams I'm working with in team coaching. And there's a lot of demand for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Dumina. I think just the point that you touched about, this gray line between coaching and therapy, it's always been something that has been difficult, and so very important that you highlight that. And maybe for all the coaches who are listening to this, is maybe to become even more aware of that thin line between coaching and therapy and when to refer. Thank you, Dumi, very insightful. Roger, what have you noticed in your own practice? What has changed?
Right. Well, again, I also had a lot of resonance with the previous panelists. There was a point that I wanted to pick up based on what Kathy was saying around the context. And I've noticed that difference that Kathy described in different geographies, different countries, was something quite useful to leverage. So it was advantageous to be coaching in different countries at different levels of response to the pandemic. And that allowed for the crossing over, a cross-pollination of those experiences, which created a really rich context for me as coach, and to be able to hold the process more effectively. So that was a one piece. I think one of the things I've become more aware of is the need to hold a systems view when engaging with a client, because in many cases the pressure being put on people, we've heard themes like, resilience popping up already in the conversation, meant that to sustain the resilience over a long period of time, we really needed to explore and enrich networks that enabled people to not only to have the right support, but also to navigate the kind of adaptive responses needed in organizations. And then the other thing I've kept very aware of is this idea of routines being disrupted. And I think so much of our experience as people comes from the contrasting of experience. We enjoy a holiday because it's different from work. We enjoy going to the exercise outside because it's different from sitting at our desk. And so much of the range of activities that our clients are experiencing is limited and restricted. And so we've had to be a lot more intentional about creating those differences and setting up routines over and over again as we've come in and out of lockdown. So I'll pause it there. Those are some of the themes, not all of them. But
great, thanks, Roger. That's a very pragmatic thing, to be able to do the contrasting, because it's definitely, I think people have had to become very inventive about how they cope with this. Mongezi, what have you experienced in terms of how you coach differently?
Never before has coaching been so necessary. I've just before this session, I came out of the supervision session with some of the coaches that I work with. And of course, a lot of the resilience challenges and issues that coaches themselves are struggling with, over and above some of the new coaches finding their own identity, and then more advanced coaches finding transitions in terms of adapting into a new world of work that doesn't involve them shaking hands or hugging, was one of the issues. But the one thing that came up quite strongly as I was listening to the conversation was how our profession has come full circle to a space where we are needed. The world needs us more now. And for the first time in my life as a coach, I don't actually have to sell coaching. I was shocked when we got into because I've been online all along, so that was not a transition for me at all, because I'm coaching all over the world. So it just moved from Skype to Zoom. But other than that, I was all rubbing my shoulders and go like, "Oh, well, I'm sorted." But the most important thing that I noticed as the year advanced in 2020 was how I was busier. And not busier because I'm looking for work, but busier because people are looking for me to help, to support, to create a space for people to sit and be listened to and be held and be heard. It is an important time for us as coaches to really pivot into a space of confidence and confidently moving into our offering. So that's one big thing. But the second thing that I can share, other than everything that has been shared now, is around how skills need to adjust. What's been fascinating, again, sometimes it sounds like I'm bragging, but I'm blessed because God prepared me long time ago. So when this thing came, I used to be in IT. So when technology stuff came, I was ready. I'm a technology child, so I was fine. But what I'm noticing is how people, my coaches, executives, leaders across the continent and across the world, even from what we call advanced countries, are struggling to essentially cope with technology and using fundamental technology to do stuff. And I think that creates a new interesting layer for coaches, at least for me, in terms of first having to hold them in the space of discomfort or anxiety around first, how am I using the platform, before we can get them to now really be human in front of the platform. That's what I can share for now.
That's very, very insightful. Thank you, Mongezi. I like what you say about coaching coming full circle, and this is the time for us to shine. I really think all the coaches out there, not just because it's our time, but because we can actually help, and that will be the second to be discussed. But thank you, Mongezi. Sunny, what has been your experience of how you had to change and be different as a coach, if at all?
I think I love what everybody has had to say. I think our leaders that we work with have had to adapt fast, furiously, and almost fearlessly. And it's been very scary for them, and they've needed help. And I completely agree with Mongezi. We've never been more needed than we are now in terms of who can walk alongside the leaders, the managers that we work with. They have been stressed, they have been anxious, they have been pushed, they have lost people to COVID, they have lost members of their team to stress, they have had to endure the most incredible tensions and conflicts that have erupted in many teams, and they've had to learn. One of the things that I've worked with very much is helping leaders to be able to manage the conflict themselves that has erupted in their teams, because they don't have the usual get together for a coffee, walk over to somebody's desk and sort out something that's come up. So a lot of work around tension and conflict and building and rebuilding relationships. And I've had to do a lot of mediation with clients, but I made a decision very early on to coach them into doing it for themselves, and so that they felt that they were the ones who were resolving it, and that they had the skill and didn't always have to bring in somebody from outside. And it's also meant that leaders have had to learn who their people are at a deeper level, not knowing how to do it because they didn't really do it before. Many leaders didn't, and that they couldn't work on Zoom and on Microsoft Teams unless they built the relationships with the members of their team, and they had to let go of favoritism and really work more with equality and diversity and really bringing in other points of view. And they failed many, many, many times. And so that's where we've been called upon to help them to bring equality and bring in all the voices that are needed in their their teams. And then we had really amusing and funny things that happened, like people showing up in their pajama bottoms and they would stand up, or maybe they didn't have anything down there. You know, they would stand up and whoops, they weren't dressed for the part. So lots of learning has happened for people. And a lot of loss for some of the younger leaders has been when their voices haven't been brought in, and how they've had to learn to step into the space. And that's been something that's been very important for younger leaders and younger people stepping into executive positions. So I think loss, stress, pressure, anxiety, and a new way of learning about themselves and about their teams. And that's what I found that I and my colleagues and business partners have had to stretch to. The same for us. We've also had to do the same work. And so I think the work we do is extraordinary. We've never been more needed, and we must never stop learning, because we need to make sure that our leaders don't either. So that's
great. Thank you. Wonderfully said, as always, Sunny. Yes, learning is key thing, no matter how experienced you are. Thank you, Sunny. And then last, for this question, Salome, how have you had to adapt your coaching practice, if at all?
Yeah, I've actually put it on 2 slides. Let me just see if I can share. Nikki. What do I share now?
Are you co-host?
There it is. There it is. Yes. So there it is. Because I have a short-term memory, you see. So I really, I guess I've had to dig deep and fetch from all my past experience to be able to assist my clients. And so my journey started last year when I presented at the business breakfast. And this article really struck me. It was from one of the biggest consulting firms in the country. And my focus was on recovery. I mean, when COVID just struck, but this talk was in October, and I've done a lot of reading on everything about COVID and leadership and teams before that session. And it blew my mind. If you look at the recovery phase of COVID, creating new strategy and operating procedures, uniting people behind purpose, vision, and goals, building trust and managing change, adapting to changing demands from stakeholders, developing agile thinking and execution. And the other 2, I don't dabble in because I don't know a thing about it: risk mitigation, financial stability. But it struck me how coaching and team coaching was so apt to help people in those scenarios. And so I was really excited, and I've started bringing a lot more of my project management into this. Let me just minimize that. Okay, so why project management? So I have my clients, their vision, mission, goals were not relevant anymore. A lot of them had to just rethink, recreate, and throw things out the door. So it was crucial to help them to find a clear and compelling purpose for the future. And that future is not long, it's basically 2 to 3 years. Everything was up in arms. So that was almost like we did our strategic facilitation in the past. And then help them to lead with a stakeholder approach, considering that stakeholders might have shifted. You have new stakeholders, and they are in their own particular context and crises, and how we needed to really take carefully into account where we're going, and with almost looking at change in a project-oriented way. Reason for this is I've learned through project management execution that people are more focused. If it's planned well, there are definite milestones to be measured and hopefully celebrated. So that keeps people focused in a time they can't think too much about else. They've got project to deliver. They've got their milestones. But at the same time, I made them realize, I realized and then helped them to realize that if they want high performance cultures, they want to reach their goals, they cannot do that without the necessary support, the necessary empathy, the necessary humaneness in a time like this. So to lead a cross-functional, often geographically dispersed teams, I really resonate with what Doreen said here. It's sometimes really hard to team coach because some are in the room on their phone and some are in the room with Zoom or Teams. I've learned how to do WebEx training. One needs to be flexible to learn what platform works for different organizations. And we need to adapt. So I've had to adapt very quickly and just make this work. People fall off and they come back on board again with team meetings. So it's not that easy. So I resonate with her, but it can be done. It's very helpful to help everyone to sort of just connect with each other, to see each other's faces, to know they're working together, and to get the support from me as a coach and from each other. So yeah, to work in short adaptable sprints, you know, because everything changes so quickly. So just to help them think agile and think, how can we remove the barriers continuously? How can we have quick meetings? How do we have meetings more often, just to sort out problems and remove the barriers so that projects can happen. Yeah, so be agile to, as we've always said, to fail forward. And yeah, so yeah, I find a mixed method approach that I always really enjoy, training and coaching to be useful. And I found that my work has shifted to Africa, funny enough, in the last year. So all my work is in African companies and all around Africa, and it's amazing how they've embraced coaching, how much they need it. And yeah, short and sweet. But I think also the capacity building, if one works with a leadership team, the capacity building also needs attention. You also need to train a good number of leaders in the organization to help the leadership team facilitate their projects and their teams. So
this whole leader as coach and manager as coach kind of approach, yeah. So let me...
with myself, I may say, with myself, I found that I had needed mindfulness training. So I went on a coaching journey, just keep myself sane, and I felt that I'm sleeping much more than ever before. And I think one is plainly exhausted, but I make sure I get 8 hours sleep at night.
Well, sleep is very, very important. Thank you, Salome. I really love how this is what I love about coaching. And we're moving on to the second part of the discussion now, is how coaching is such an eclectic approach to helping people. So Salome brings in project management. You know, Roger spoke about systemic thinking, and some of the other people also mentioned that. So you can really bring what you have in your toolkit. Let's move on to Sunny. I know that you have to leave us soon, so I want to start the second question maybe with you. And we've spoken now about how coaches have adopted their practice, and we've already touched on some of the benefits. But let's go straight into the benefits of coaching now. What have you observed? How has your coaching helped clients in this crisis? And coaching is obviously confidential, so we're not going to divulge details, but if you can give some examples completely anonymously, obviously it might make it very tangible for us to understand. Just before I give you the floor, Sunny, I am a passionate researcher, and I've been amazed to see recently how many meta studies have been done by top researchers showing statistically significant randomized controlled trial longitudinal, the gold standard of research, that coaching does work. There's no doubt anymore from a research scientific perspective that coaching really does do what we claimed in the past and couldn't prove. And my own research I did at the beginning of last year, I interviewed these coaches and I made a mapping between how they told me coaching is helping, and in fact how coaching can help with crisis management skills. And the crisis, not unbeknown to me, coaching can actually facilitate crisis management skills. So that's just a bit of research I did. But Sunny, please tell us, what have you noticed? What is actually, when the rubber hits the tar, how has coaching helped clients in this pandemic?
So I think it comes back to learning. And I think two things. One is that they learned that the things their coaches were trying to help them with were the right things for them to work on, and they were just being a bit slow about it, and they really needed to get themselves in gear and get on with and really understanding themselves and more reflection and really understanding their team and understanding what relationships meant in professional relationships in the workplace and how incredibly important they were with customers and suppliers as well. So I think learning about relationships and learning that they had to really dig deep to figure out how to do the work on themselves that was needed in order for them to succeed with the way that we were beginning to work through the pandemic. At first, they were completely shocked and thought it would be for a month or two. And when they realized how difficult it was, they realized they needed new skills. They needed to learn how to work their technology. They needed to learn how to work their own emails. They needed to learn how to do a lot of things on their own at home. They didn't have people that they could rely on to run around for them all the time, although they did work in the background, of course. They had to become very self-sufficient and become really good at it. And that sounds bizarre, you know, for a leader, but they so rely on other people and so and delegate either badly or don't delegate the right things. And so they really had to learn a lot about themselves. And I think that's, you know, one of the first things. I can't quite remember the question. You asked me the question again, so I make sure I answer it.
No, we're on the right track. It is how did coaching actually help people? So it sounds like what you're saying is it could help people with these challenges. What else have you observed that it helped them with?
Okay. The other thing was that it helped them believe in themselves. It helped them find a way, because they deal with challenges and struggles. And that doesn't mean they're not narcissistic or don't have big egos or aren't arrogant sometimes. They still may have all of that. But they actually began to realize that they had to be the ones to lead. They had to be the ones to help their leaders to begin to lead. They had to begin to, I don't know if anybody has seen the film In Search of Greatness. If you haven't, I suggest, highly recommend it. It's about the greatest athletes in the world and how did they get there? And it's how could these leaders help their teams to become great? Not just how could they be great, but how could they be the ones to help their teams to be great and be, as Mandela talked, the ones behind, leading from behind their teams. And I think those are the two of the biggest things that I noticed that the people that I work with really had to learn how to work with and how to adapt. And they also needed their coaches because they fell down a lot. They fell down a lot. They had COVID in their families. They had to learn to love people in a different way. They had to bring out a different kind of humanity than they'd ever had to bring out. And an example is this one organization where they lost to COVID and lost to another disease, two members of their team. And it took 3 months before the CEO realized that the organization and the people didn't realize, and the executive committee didn't realize that counseling was available for people. Sure. And so the things they've had to learn about how their system works has also been huge. And I think Roger talked about it, and maybe Mungezi, that it's the system that is what's working and what's not working in the system. And that's also where they've had to focus, how to work with the system in order to run the business. And so what at first they focused only on the business, and they had to learn how to bring in working with the people and work with both for it to work sustainably. I think that's what I would say.
Thank you, Sunny. There's a really very, very insightful comment you've made there. Dorian, back to you now. How have you seen coaching help clients practically during this pandemic? So mute, Dorian.
Dof. So one of the really powerful observations of coaching with two executive teams, two different companies, was how people show up differently when they are working remotely from home, online.
Mm.
So there's been pain around uneven contribution, uneven relational, emotional intelligence skills that surfaced in the excos that were covered up when you're meeting on the corridor and other people cover for you in these conversations around your desk. So the flaws in people's interaction, if you want to call them flaws or misalignment, have shown up particularly in this period in what should have been united close teams, say. So that has been one thing which put the focus on relational skills, on self-awareness, on not just teaching mindfulness, awareness, but management of my awareness. So if I'm aware of this, what's changing? And what am I practicing to do it? So that's been an ongoing conversation, is how do I build resilience in myself? How do I rise to what needs to be done? What am I now aware of that I wasn't aware of before when we weren't operating like this? So I think the biggest impact over the last year and a half has been building that self-awareness, self-management, relational awareness, and raising people to work with each other when they needed to, at the level at which they supposed they were working before. And it shows up differently now.
Wow, that's interesting. So it's almost like this pandemic exposed those, like you say, those limitations in a sense, in a wonderful way to help it develop it then.
Well, yes, because it showed up people's learning styles in a way, so that if somebody has a preference and a blind spot, the blind spot is going to really show up under these circumstances, and their awareness of where they don't normally have to function now comes to the fore.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very good insights there, Dorian. Kathy, what have you seen? How have you helped your clients?
Slow learner. Coming to the one thought, and something that I really noticed, where do we really add value in times like this, is at the moment there's a big trend in literature for leaders around their ability to provide a psychologically safe space for their people, how important that is. And then the question is, but what about the leaders themselves? Where do they have a psychologically safe space? And for me, that is really where coaching adds value, is we provide that space for leaders themselves to talk about what's really going on for them, that the human side of leadership, their personal uncertainties, their anxieties, their emotions, their vulnerabilities. And I think that's really, for me, an absolute key area where we add value as coaches, what I've noticed. And in addition to that is helping them to providing a space where they can figure things out, to make sense of what's actually going on in their context, with others, for themselves. And touching on what others have said earlier, Sunny and Dorian, big focus on relationships. Because in this virtual world, what a lot of people are finding hard is the lack of interpersonal connectivity. You know, the informal chats down the passage, which was so key to building relationships in the past. Now they've got to figure out how to build relationships in a different way. And they have over the years, but that's been a big emphasis, is working at that in a more concrete way. So really working with how to work at their connections. And for leaders, you know, that's all around 360 degree, not only with their people, but all of those. So those have been big focus areas, I would say. And then one other area that comes up a lot is, in addition to the pandemic, the constant changes and other uncertainties that unfold in their organizations. They have changes in their teams, new bosses, they're bringing on new people, et cetera, so they're constantly negotiating those dynamics. And I find people have to repurpose and renew their leadership identity, given certain identity and tensions they experience. So for example, an HR executive coaching a new CEO coming on board with wanting to move very quickly to downsizing and retrenching. And this HR executive feeling an identity tension, a dissonance with that leadership approach and leadership values. And now that is something you bring into coaching. So it's being able to hold and help leaders navigate some of these identity tensions as well.
Great. Lovely how you interpreted through your focus area, which is identity and uncertainty. And they're saying it's lonely at the top. It's even lonelier at the top now, right? And this is where coaching comes in. Thank you for that, Kathy. Dumi, please share your thoughts with us. How have you helped your clients?
Thank you, Nikki. And really love the sentiments you just shared now, Kathy. Thank you for that. Resonating, definitely. And what Sunny said about the learning, and I wanted to add the relearning. I think for me, I've had to learn new ways of being while staying really virtual and showing up differently in that. And one of the ways is I find that some of my sessions starting a little earlier and then going on a little longer than the agreed time, and longer checking ins around that, and then bringing it back into that. I found that that's a useful space to allow our clients to just breathe in the session around where they are, both real physiologically doing that, and then centering themselves, and then getting into the work. Found that can be very useful, whether it's one-on-one or in the teams, especially with teams. And people seem to like that and get very good feedback around those practices around how to center yourself and really ground yourself and be. So relearning both self and client, and then groundedness in our shared humanity, Nikki. Yes. Understanding that we are in this together, and minimizing or reducing the narratives of separating and othering. And I find that a lot of my clients are in that space where they're searching for something that helps us find each other better. And this is why I found that the team coaching, and especially the Ubuntu coaching part, has been very popular, and people wanting more of those sessions. And that helps us develop more a greater or deeper self-confidence in ourselves as coaches, also in our clients. And confidence in their teams. I find that some of my executive clients is more of, I didn't know that this person had it in them to do this. During a crisis, people show up, and their talents and gifts are revealed that the system was not even aware they had. And then relying on that, and then not having little groups that you rely and depend on, understanding that the whole system is available to you. And then lastly, for me, is the issue of vulnerability. A lot of my especially a few of my CEO clients that have had to be more vulnerable than they've ever been before. And then learning to normalize being vulnerable in crisis with their teams, knowing that we may not meet our target, and I haven't pulled my weight in it because of this and that. It's not an excuse, but it's understanding that you are not in control of everything. It's VUCA in your face, in a way. So, yeah.
I love that. It's exactly what it is. Thank you, Dumi. And it's amazing. Like you say, pandemic was bad, but also it allowed people opportunities to show some of the skills and abilities they probably didn't even know they had. And so the theme of learning and coaching, helping people learn, comes through strongly. Thank you for that. Roger, what have you noticed? How have you helped your clients during this time?
Right, some great comments from the panel. And I really think that vulnerability theme is important. You know, in complexity theory, you've got this notion of edge of chaos. When a system is pushed to the absolute limits, there's actually a silver lining. It's tough, it's dangerous, it's risky, but the silver lining is that's where we see the innovation potential coming through. And I think we've seen examples of that, for example, with the shift to remote working that was kind of forced, but people didn't think it would work before. Now they see that it can work. And so I think in many cases, the coaching is about, and I want to link back into the themes that people have talked about. Could I call it the mindfulness themes that people have talked about? Because when we're stressed in a crisis, it's really hard to see the wood from the trees. It's hard to keep an open mind and open thinking. And I found that I've had to work quite hard at the cognitive flexibility piece. This idea that can we revise the way in which we're seeing things because the situation is changing, even though we're stressed. And so it goes back to holding that vulnerability, practicing mindfulness, opening up our thought processes, and then being quite flexible. I think in goal theory, certainly the goal theorists that have looked at goal theory from a complexity perspective remind us that not all goals should be smart. that this idea of performance goals, and they perhaps are overused in the corporate space, being quite risky during times like these. And so, you know, it's about, in many cases, helping people to hold those a little bit more lightly and to develop learning goals, fuzzy goals, revisable goals, or even just a vision or purpose like Salome was talking to, that helps them to navigate and, you know, change the metrics as we're going in order to kind of navigate the crisis. The risk otherwise is that we end up with this, what they call inattentional blindness, where we are so focused on the target that we miss that the context has changed. So there's that aspect. I think it's also changed, you know. I feel like last year and this year are two different, very distinct phases in kind of what's been needed. Perhaps a sprint to a marathon. I think there's more emphasis this year on renewal. How do we keep going? It's getting quite long in the tooth and keep people fresh. And, you know, I think the other thing, if you asked about cases that's come through, is because of the need to kind of use more distributed leadership to build those relationships, even though it's remote, to get people involved and get that adaptive response going. I found, curiously, that more often than not, coaching clients get huge benefit from practicing and developing a coaching style of leadership, because it enables others to share the load. It enables a more distributed leadership response. It builds capacity. And I found that clients that have adopted that kind of approach, even if it's just off the back of coaching, not training interventions to develop the internal coach, but they've been able to build capacity to bring, you know, as Nancy, as O'Neill said, backbone and heart into their leadership practice, and to really make an impact. So I think those are some of the themes that come to mind.
Right. Yeah. No, thanks, Roger. I was just thinking as you were talking, you must have been so well positioned. You know, your PhD having being based on complexity theory. It's a very handy theory to have knowledge of when chaos strikes, right? So thank you for highlighting those themes. Great. And then Bongezi, you're up next. How have you been able to help your clients? What have you seen out there in the field?
Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, it's been fascinating just listening to what's coming up. So I'm going to share for me an acronym because it kind of will allow me to summarize. Otherwise, I'll go on forever. So, ARC.
Right.
What I've seen already emerging in terms of the value that clients are getting, first of all, is accelerating. While we've lost people, because the corona has been really terrible for everyone in terms of loss, and really coming face to face with the reality of loss continuously all the time. So it's accelerated that pain, it accelerated that tension. But what it also has accelerated is things that we as leaders in the human space, in HR, in organizational development, in consulting, have been really driving since at least 1960, when we started really discovering or rediscovering humanism as the way of being, and getting over this 1925 model of treating people like objects and machines and all of those things. So it accelerated that thinking 25, 30 times. And that kind of got me really excited to be able to be in a space where I'm working with leaders to embed and reinforce. Nothing is new that we haven't been telling you when I was teaching you at INSEAD, when I was teaching you at USB, when I was teaching you everywhere else. It's essentially the same things we are saying to you. Calm down, take 20 minutes. In all of that chaos, the best thing to do in chaos is to pause and look at the patterns. So it has accelerated all of those lessons that we've been trying to get leaders to do. So that's been for me fantastic to experience and to hold leaders to do. The R for me is then around rehumanizing. So quickly, before I move away from accelerating, I think Salome and I yesterday were teaching the leadership group, and we spoke about, I spoke about VUCA squared, and she spoke about VUCA on steroids, right? So it's really just VUCA, except now it's double time in terms of that. And then rehumanizing. What I've been excited about with coaching and where the journey of coaching is in the world today, and right from the beginning, I've been a big proponent of this, is around how coaching has been how we are as humans, is how we have conversations as humans naturally before we get messed up by untraining that happens in our educational institutions that teach us to be in our heads and less in our hearts and less in our bodies. And we essentially have come back to Ubuntu, our humanness as a root. And what COVID has done is really bring us back to, can we sit down? Can we see people as people? Because once you discover the humanity of people, it's not easy, but it's simple. Because the person you're dealing with is a human being. And it's been fascinating for once. This message is landing. When I'm working with leaders, they kind of, oh no, I want to go and I want to drag them. I want to do their performance management. And I gotta slow down.
Right.
Are they people? Yes. What do you know about people? They're complex. So how do we then work with the complexity of a human being? And bringing leaders back to themselves first before they can be able to connect with the rest of the world. I think it's been a fantastic thing to see, even with all the chaos. Lastly, the C for me is about containing.
Okay.
What this particular era has brought, which has been absolutely useful and a really great advantage for coaches to take as we make ourselves useful in front of the clients and working with clients, is around how do we contain and help leaders and clients in general to contain their anxiety in this space. If all you've done as a coach for once in the world is to just create a space for a leader to be vulnerable and break down and be ready to see themselves, it's no longer really such a high standard, but it is so hard, even for us, because we have learned some very weird habits about step 1, step 2, step 3, model, framework. And I get in trouble quite a lot with this, where I say, this whole thing where we keep teaching people, and again, I'm going to get in trouble. We keep teaching people that it's about a client agenda. It's not about a client agenda. It's about the we agenda. And the we agenda is you as a coach, you are coming in. What are you there to do? You are there to contain the space, and that's your agenda. The client agenda is what? The client agenda is wherever it is they want to go, because that's essentially the Rogerian and the humanistic underpinning that all of coaching has come to. And then just to tie it up very quickly then to competencies, what it means for coaches, which is something I'm really passionate about now, is around how as coaches do we start looking at our competencies and how do we develop competencies that help us do what the world is calling for now. Thank you. That's all.
Fantastic. I love the arc. I'm definitely going to remember that. I think there's a paper in there somewhere. Thank you. And also the positive spin you put on this, how it's actually bringing us together and accelerating things. So fantastic insights. Thank you, everyone. We are, this is scheduled till 6:30, so we have 20 minutes left. And I want to now, after we've heard this incredible comments from this panel, really, I almost think we can analyze this, do a bit of thematic analysis, and write a kick-ass paper that we can publish in the top journal. That's how my mind works. But I want to also now open it up to the audience. So we have 56 participants. So I haven't seen all your faces. I don't even know all the names. There's some of our students, but there's also some other people. Do any of you have any questions that you want to ask? You can either, I prefer it obviously if you unmute and talk to us, but you're welcome to type it in the chat box. After you've listened to what the panel has said around how they've changed their practice and what coaching can do, does anyone have a question for someone particular or for the panel in general? Please, let's open the floor. Feel free to just unmute and speak.
Can I just ask? We didn't hear Professor Salome yet.
It's fine. In the interest of time, we're going to open to the panel. So yeah.
Nikki,
Yes.
it's Liesl here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Liesl, please go ahead.
So a question, I think everyone on the panel, just from my time in your program, I know will be able to answer this question. But so here's the thing, whether it's one-on-one coaching or team coaching, the problem with a screen is, you know, when you sit with someone, you can follow their thinking, you get a sense of, you know, what they're feeling. But on a screen, that physiological kind of tenseness or you know, something that someone holds, very difficult to do in one-on-one, but almost impossible to do in team coaching. So what do the guys out there with experience, how do they handle that, or how do they build that into their coaching?
Very good question. I'm also curious. I'm not a team coach myself, so I'm curious. So we have a number of team coaches on the panel. Who would like to take that one? Salome, since you haven't had a chance recently.
I'll make it short so we can get as many questions as possible. I've just tuned in much more to the body language and signals that we do get, the tone, the volume, the breathing, the eye contact, if that's there. But if it's not there, you have the voice, you have the volume, you have hesitancy, you have silences. And it taught me so much to be, you know, a much better listener, I think, after this year and a half, because you have to listen. So you have to listen. That's sometimes all the body language that you can have. And then, of course, ask more regularly. Are you okay? I heard you hesitate a little bit there. You need more time to think, or are you still okay? You know, without overdoing it and making him awkward or her awkward. But yeah, just zooming in on what we can get from virtual, the body language signals we can get.
So it sounds almost like, Salome, like when you lose one faculty, you overcompensate by using the other faculties, right? Yeah. Mongezi, I see, I'll get to the audience now, but Mongezi, since you're also a team coach, what do you have anything to add to this?
I actually wanted to say what you've just said now, which is our body is actually fantastic as a tool when you use it to listen beyond just our ears. Because one of the things that we do, we spend so much time trying to listen with our ears. But if you listen with your whole body, your body actually gives you even vibrations. I've had to coach 15-minute segments to 500 people, but have to listen really well, not all at the same time. But in that 15 minutes, you want to complete the full coaching conversation. But what I found is that it was on the telephone. It was not even Skype, so I wasn't seeing anything. Right, it was not even visual. But in that, clients would be very amazed at how much I'm picking up their movements, micro movements in how they're doing. It's all about how do you learn also as a coach to listen with your body.
Fantastic. So I think that the two of you are in agreement there, Salome. So it's about relying on these faculties we don't even know we have. George, your hand was up next. Do you have a question for us, for the panel?
Yeah, thank you, Nikki, and your esteemed panel of doctors. I see everybody's got PhDs. I feel very safe in this room. The overall experience for me as somebody who's pivoted out of corporate into sort of an entrepreneurial space where in my day-to-day job, I also engage with people who run organizations, whether they're big or small. But more in particular, I work with the middle tier, which is often the neglected tier, to hold these conversations of how to better navigate these changes. What I found interesting and what has also accumulated to the discussions of your panel is that the safety aspect of why coaching needs to happen and why, if it's instructed from an executive team, because I mean, corporates are pronounced to actually throw money at a problem. So when we discover there's a challenge in a big organization, they throw money at it. So they send all these managers on these, fancy development courses, and they come back and they say, well, coach your teams. But I think the safety aspect, what I've viewed in my experience, has been where people struggle. Because when you are in a middle management tier, you often get an instruction from your boss to say, I want execution. There's not often that exchange to say, look, I need you to build capacity for the ecosystem to be safe in order for us to be flexible. What COVID has done now, because none of these cycles have followed a predictable phase, which means you could anticipate when your changes is going to happen. It's forced them actually to learn these skills by themselves. For the first time, people had to actually inquire whether the team is good or whether their well-being is all right, whether they check in. And it's something that we take for granted, but a lot of people don't have that skills just to be human, just to say, how are you? Without expecting them to answer, what have you done? I think instinctively we've created this culture because we've adopted the European and the USA model to say, you need execution. If you're a manager, whether that's a middle manager, you need execution. Execution is your priority KPI. And I think it's interesting also observing and learning from what I've experienced in the conversations on the panel, that more importantly, that's going to be the key skill of the future, for you not to be a person that can get execution going, because the people will do execution by themselves. It's for you to be able to step back and say, how do you build this vocational tier of skill, which is often not relayed on a CV. On a CV, you're not going to get somebody's vocational skills. You're going to get their technical skills.
Thanks, George. Thank you for that, for sharing your insight as well. And it ties onto the whole theme of learning and relearning and being flexible and agile. Thank you for that. Vicky, your hand is up. Do you have a question or a comment?
I do. Hi, thank you. And I've really enjoyed listening to the panel. And
Great.
It's resonated, enormously with my own experiences. I have 3 questions. They won't necessarily all be answered now, but I'd love at least perhaps a rapid shot.
Right.
The first one is around, is there any, have you experienced any difference in the type of organizations? So whether you're working in multinationals or corporates or SMEs or medium and large size businesses. The second question is, have you noticed a shift in the archetype of what we would see as a great or good leader pre-pandemic and what's showing up now? And the third question is, have any of you, as I have in my practice, been, not even secretly in my case, frustrated at having to go back to basics?
Meaning? What do you mean by basics?
Well, a huge amount of my work is in strategy and is in the future, and helping leaders get their heads out of the weeds, and play a more strategic, be more strategically driven.
Right.
Whereas so many have had their heads in the weeds. That's showing up on a global level as well, which is a massive frustration of mine and an area I'm interested in working in.
Yeah.
But that has been an incredible frustration. And I'm not a coach, but I coach as part of broader programs. So I am actually considering a complete pivot in my career as a result of the last 18 months.
Okay.
But those
Thank
are my
you,
3 questions.
Thank you, Vicky. Great. And as you said, we might not get through all of them, but panel, let's try. So let's keep it short. Dorian, have you seen any difference in the types of organizations that approach you to be coached? Dorian, I'm just checking that you're not muted.
And the main difference for me has been the quality of the leader who asks for an intervention or for Yeah, for team coaching to, and they tend to be smaller companies.
Okay.
It's the kind of CEO or leader that says, I want things to work better at the human level. So the humanity of working together has come to the fore more in these COVID months than I've ever really heard before in all the years I've been coaching.
Great. So that is also, sorry, does it also mean the coaching market is expanding if you're saying that smaller companies are certainly coming on board that you haven't seen before?
Well, when I say smaller companies, the two that I'm particularly thinking of, they're international companies, but the units that I work with are in South Africa. So, and it's the South African leadership that has taken the initiative. And they're working, interestingly, in both cases, they're working at odds with their overseas parents, if you like.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Dorian. Dumi, I see you signaled that you wanted to also comment.
Yes, I did. Thanks. Great question, Vicky, on that. I would say first, it's all kinds now of clients that are seeking coaching. I've seen that from SMEs, small companies that are saying, what can we arrange? Do you have discounted rates for us? We would really like our people to access our coaching services to support them to cope and engage and then try and thrive under these conditions. So from SMEs to NPOs, nonprofit organizations, NGOs, to schools that are looking to support their teachers in that. And then all the way to multilaterals, multinational companies. I'm coaching now, working on leadership coaching with the African Union, NEPAD, and in the United Nations system, because I used to work for the UN before. It's easier to access that. So I'm finding that they're taking that on quite easily to say, can we have coaching in that? And major multinational corporations that are getting coaching. So it's right across.
Fantastic. And I must say, in my experience as well, I've had clients that haven't coached for a while that approach me and say, please, can you help us? So from what I can see, there's definitely a scope in that. Let's maybe cover Vicky's second question. Kathy, can I ask you, have you seen a shift in what it is now to be a great leader? What kind of people are coming to the front as great leaders that maybe were not in this limelight before? Vicky, I hope I interpret your question correctly, but Kathy, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for me, I think the key thing is being adaptive leaders. So they're able to shift from being a crisis leader to then being more collaborative. And I think that was really important with the different waves in the pandemic. You'd have crisis leadership to rein things in, but then moving to collaborative visioning and engaging people, more relational, more people-centric. And so you have to be adaptive and be able to flex your style, but there's certainly a big focus on being people-centric, the humane aspects of leadership that have been emphasized here by the coaches, and emotional intelligence underlies all of that. So compassion and empathy, critical during these times.
Great. So it sounds like definitely a shift in what kind of leader is more effective at this stage.
From more authoritarian before and more micromanagement. The other shift is, because you're working virtually, to more trusting, letting go and being able to trust your people. I'd say that's another big shift.
Great. I'm just going through my list here. Salome, do you have anything to add on what you've seen? What kind of leaders are coming to the forefront now?
Not so much that, but I think what is a blessing that I see now, the companies that I engage with now have realized finally the penny has dropped that everyone needs coaching. They're much more geared to give everyone some sense of coaching, some training in coaching, some coaching opportunity, rather than just at the top. And we've always wanted that. And I think that's a big blessing. And to the question of back to basics, I actually love going back to basics. I think it's often those things that we forget. So
fantastic, and that's a good time to go back to that. Thanks. So Vicky, I hope it covered some of your questions. I'm just mindful of some other questions I see in the chat box. Vindelwa asked, do you find that women leaders as primary caregivers who have to care for their children, homeschooling, do they need coaching? So has anyone on the panel seen that they suddenly have clients that fit that description, women leaders that's also primary caregivers? Anyone on the panel who wants to comment on that?
I will just say something there.
Sure. Thanks, Kathy.
Oh, I'm muted. I think, I don't know if it's always just saying it's gender specific or making it about gender, because I really do think everyone who wants coaching for so many different reasons pops up for coaching. I do think there's some challenges for women because they have to navigate traditionally through the way roles have been defined, the balances and the tensions in terms of parental, being a parent, taking on more of the nurturing role. And I do think that some of that's changing now because people have been at home and working virtually, and it's actually shifted to more sharing of responsibilities. So I've also seen that shift that's happened. So it's actually brought about some changes to the, I think, for the positive, in terms of not such gendered roles playing out. I don't know if it's just something I've noticed.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think people, in my research as well, when I interviewed coaches, they saw some of their clients struggling. Some of the men who maybe typically weren't so involved with the chores at home.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Kathy. So we have about 5 minutes. I can maybe do 1 or 2 more questions. Anyone in the audience who has a question they would like to ask?
Just to say, for me, just to say thank you, Vicky. To say
Hi, Vicky.
thank you, and also, yeah, I really appreciate being part of this ongoingly. I might be a little bit sort of outfield here in the UK, but you know, my home base is supposed to be Zambia, and I do work with clients in South Africa. So I know many of you will work globally as well, but yeah, it's just also some belonging and affiliation for me too.
Fantastic. Lovely to have you joining us all the way.
So badly.
Lovely,
so
Vicky. Thank you so much. Thank you. I see there's one, Marjorie. Oh, there's 2 hands actually. I'm not, yeah, Marjorie. And I don't know who between you and Neville was first, but let's go with Marjorie first. Sorry, that's the first hand I see.
Just one thing that I picked up that some of the panel mentioned, and it's actually something that I was always thinking of, forward thinking, is how do you get that management, the coaching skill sold as in the future, that it's integral as a leader, that you have to have that skill. For me, that is the future now. How do you get that shift?
Are you talking about how, as a coach, you sell that to the leadership of the organization?
How do you get the mind shift of how we view skills of leaders so that a coaching skill becomes part of how leaders should be equipped?
Oh, I see. Okay, so how do we make more leaders as coach and managers as coach? Someone in the panel who wants to take that? Dorian, yes.
I think one of the quickest ways to get somebody to respond, if you like, to their blind spots is when they are actually feeling pain about some of the things that they don't do well relationally. So getting someone to open up and to be more reflective about what might not be working for them, where they are not comfortable with themselves, is quite a good way in to opening up an area that perhaps they haven't been particularly sensitive to, hadn't needed to be sensitive to before COVID put a spotlight on the quality of their relationships and what they were picking up from the people that work with them.
Great, yeah. And I think, Dorian, that's so much in line with, we all know that if you have a client on a burning platform, they're ready and open to learn. So maybe this is what is provided. I think it's time for one more. Neville, your hand is up. What question do you have for us?
Yes, it's more a comment than a question. Firstly, let me say what a wonderful forum this has been. And thank you very much for arranging it. It's been enlightening and useful. I just wanted to pick up something that Mongezi mentioned about supervision. He said that he had just come from a supervision session. And what I found in the last 18 months is that my own supervision has been absolutely critical. You know, Kathy mentioned providing a safe space for our clients. But there has been so much trauma and so much loss, and really a great deal of difficulty, I think, as all of the panelists have referred to, that, it's been quite tough for me personally to find a containment for my own anxiety and dealing with all my clients' anxiety and difficulties. So I just wanted to make the point about how important supervision is for us as coaches.
Fantastic point. Thank you. That's a very good point, Neville. And in fact, you've maybe planted a thought in my head now that maybe the next Leadership Coaching Roundtable should be perhaps about supervision, and we can get some experts on the field, because it's something that not all coaches have embraced, and something that I think is essential. I am mindful of time, and we are at 6:30 as we said we would. So I would like to really, this has been amazing. To be honest, I wasn't sure how this would work out. I just thought, I've seen people do it in other parts of the world, and I thought, why don't we do it in South Africa? And I was really blown away. Again, by the fantastic panel we have, who are all faculty on our program, and that is why we have such an incredible influence and management coaching program, because that's the quality of lecturers that we deal with. Also for the audience, for your participation. So thank you very much. I think we can all go away here knowing that coaching is a way forward for helping people out there. And we must be adaptable and learn and just keep doing the amazing work that we've done. So thank you very much, everyone. Go safe, stay healthy, and we hopefully see you back in 2 months from now with another interesting topic and exciting speakers. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks for organizing.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well done, Nikki. Thanks, team.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure. Stay well.